After watching this drive through San Jose, I think you'll agree one of two things about full self-driving is true. Either the new approach using human data to train a generalized driving AI is working, or the reason version 12 has been so slow to roll out is because Tesla employees are the ones remote driving all the cars from their offices. In all seriousness, this really is the most human-feeling version of FSD yet, and there's some moments in this drive you're gonna have to see to believe. The first thing it's going to have to do is escape this parking lot, and you can see it pull up to this intersection pretty cautiously, and there's an approaching car from our left-hand side and also someone leaving their parking spot from the right-hand side, so it does decide to wait it out. Parking lot performance in general, and especially the performance in these unmarked intersections, has gotten really, really good. And I've also seen some leaks in the iOS app updates where it looks like actually Smart Summon could be coming very soon, which I am super excited to try out, and I'm also excited that we're probably going to get Auto Park back too. You can see another driver ahead of us leaving their parking spot, and what I love here is that it's not coming to a full stop and doing a slow 1 or 2 mile an hour creep the entire time. And I know that may not seem like much, but creeping slowly really does show a lot of intent to other drivers, which is what they're used to, and makes it feel a lot more competent. There's a pedestrian on the right-hand side who just walks out without a care in the world. She never looked back or anything. I don't think she has a clue we're here, but the beta does a great job yielding for her. I know there's a lot of humans out there that wouldn't have been quite as nice in this situation. The exit of this parking lot is unfortunately one that is very common around here, but one that I do not like, which is this intersection right where the entrance is. It can be pretty tough to escape a situation like this, but luckily there's a pedestrian who's walking across in front of the car to the left, and it actually takes this opportunity and goes for it. This was extremely well done. It chose a perfect moment to pull out, and this is something that version 11 had quite a bit of trouble with. It would have been yielding to pretty much every vehicle in the scene. Now, as we approach this unprotected turn, you may notice that our left-hand turn signal is on for this right turn. You can see on the navigation, it definitely knows that it has to make a right turn, but yet it has the left turn signal on. That is because we have to make a left turn at the light, which means as soon as we get out of this parking lot, we're going to have to cross over multiple lanes to get all the way over into that left-hand turn lane. And as soon as traffic clears, it goes ahead and makes its move and crosses all 4 lanes at once and gets us all the way into the left-hand turn lane. Very well done. And I know there is going to be some complaints about it crossing a solid white line, which we all know is punishable by death in all 50 states, so go ahead and cry about it in the comments. Now, you may be able to just barely make out this pedestrian on the visualizations that I in the car did not see at all. So I thought this person turning right was just stopping in the road for absolutely no reason here. I did not see the pedestrian crossing in front of him at all. This is one of those scenarios where I feel like the car may have had a little bit better of an understanding of what was going on than I did in the car, because I didn't even know that pedestrian was there until I started editing this video. And while that maneuver was very well handled and very smooth, I might add, the next one was definitely not. We have a right turn to make at the light ahead, and you can see a human driver squeezing the gap between the trash can and the car next to it, and I could not believe Autopilot was about to try the same thing, but it did. I'm going to let you watch what happens here.
Oh my god.
It actually triggers the car's automatic emergency braking and makes it skid to a stop. This is definitely worth taking a closer look at. That is definitely a first for the channel. You can see that the gap is pretty tight here, but we have seen version 12 shoot tighter gaps in the past. But I think it was because it was heading towards the SUV to the left as it was passing the trash can that triggered it. Now, you might not know this, but there was actually another incident on version 12 that somebody recorded of it tapping another car's bumper in a parking lot. So I have a feeling that may be the reason that the automatic emergency braking has been turned up to 11 here. Now, to be honest, I'm not really sure what to file this disengagement under. I'm going to go ahead and call it a non-critical disengagement because, to be honest, I think the car had it handled. I think it would have completed that maneuver just fine, but it was the automatic emergency systems that overrode its decision and brought it to an abrupt stop. I seem to believe in version 12's abilities even more than the car does. We do go ahead and pull off to the side of the road because we have reached our destination, and I go ahead and put another one in and re-engage. While the car is doing its best to try to get around this trash can here, I think it's interesting to point out that the models for a lot of things, including trash cans and cones and all that, are completely gone with version 12. You can see they've been replaced with kind of just blobs that show up on the visualization. And although the blobs might look a little bit ugly, I think they actually give you a little bit more information, and I'm hoping that they take over the entire driving visualization someday. Now, we have a left turn to make here, but as you may be able to see off to the left, the road is closed. There is enough room to get around those cones though, so let's see what it wants to do here. You can see a very slow creep into the intersection. I almost feel like it knows it shouldn't turn left here, but is still trying to figure out a way to do it. And it sits here for quite a while until a car approaches from behind us. And at that point, it goes for it. Which does cause our first critical disengagement, because unlike the last video where the road closure said road closed except for local traffic, this one is a real road closure, and I did not want to interrupt whatever was going on over there. So looks like it's still having a bit of trouble in those road closure situations. It's funny, in all the road closures I put it in, it almost feels like it knows it's not the right thing to do, but always ends up just trying it anyways. We're actually going to try to navigate through that exact same road closure later in the drive to see if the same outcome happens. And as we fast forward to the next moment of interest, I wanted to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters, because I saved up every dollar you guys have sent for months and months and used it to buy a proper editing computer, which makes making videos like this a lot easier, because I really was maxing out my previous computer making these videos. So thank you for directly supporting the channel, and always know that every dollar I get from Patreon directly goes into improving quality on the channel. The driver in front of us is a little bit indecisive about his right turn up here, and you can see he slows down and then speeds up and ends up making the right at a later time, but full self-driving is able to remain extremely smooth through all of this. It doesn't even slow down as he's making the next right. Version 12 seems to be able to anticipate what people are going to do really, really well, and even when they do something unexpected, it still remains smooth. Another really good example of that up here, we're on a pretty narrow road where only one car fits at a time, and you can see it give the right-of-way to this car, but only slows down a little bit and just maintains speed as it moves over and then continues right on going. Also love how early it offsets for pedestrians compared to version 11, giving them no doubt that we see them and that we're controlling for them. And there was one specific really incredible pedestrian interaction that happens a little bit later in the video. Kind of a funky intersection here where we have to make this right turn and then make the immediate left on that street that you can see there, and it gets a little bit tripped up by this incoming car, but as soon as it was clear that he was going to stop, it goes ahead and proceeds no problem. We are about to reach our destination, and this time it actually does not pull over. It just kind of stops in the road, and it was fine because there was nobody behind us, so I just went ahead and put in a new navigation route real quick, but kind of curious. I don't know the reason why sometimes it hunts for a spot to pull over, and other times it just kind of stops in the road. And although it's doing a really good job on these streets with no lane lines or anything, going to go ahead and fast forward until we get some more interesting scenarios, because there's a lot we got to see in this video. Coming up here, we have our first pretty tough unprotected left turn, and the speed limit on this road is 40, but as you can see by the Model Y passing in front of us, traffic is flowing a little bit faster than that. It does have to creep really far out here, even over the crosswalk, in order to have any visibility of incoming traffic. And after the car passes that comes from the right, it creeps out a little bit more, makes sure it's safe, and then proceeds. You can see it crossing right over those lane lines there, taking the human path through that turn for sure. Now, it did get pretty lucky in that unprotected turn because there wasn't a lot of traffic, but I think unprotected turns have actually been improved quite a bit. This version seems to be much more cautious at intersections like this that are kind of blind because of traffic parked on both sides. There was no creep wall displayed in the visualizations there, but it did an excellent job of creeping out right to the limit before proceeding when it had a good view on both sides. Intersections like this are pretty dangerous and unfortunately extremely common around here. But again, you can see how it creeps very, very slowly and kind of does one final stop at the very end here before proceeding confidently. This seemed to be pretty consistent, and it's nice because this is exactly how humans behave in intersections like this. We creep out to just before the point where we're starting to obstruct traffic, and then take a look and then proceed when it's safe. There's a bus in our lane, and instead of staying behind it, it actually moves over to get beside it, which is probably the same thing I would have done, but there's actually a car ahead of the bus and an immediate merge. For a moment, it almost felt like it was slowing to let the car in front of us, but when they were slow to proceed off the light, it just went for it. Probably the same thing I would have done in that situation, and again, loving the way it's ignoring the lane lines here and crossing them very early. You can see it's pretty patient for this unprotected left turn here. I think the last version would have just went for it right now, but this version stays a little bit more patient and lets the next car pass. It does seem like they've dialed back the assertiveness of these unprotected turns, which is probably a good thing. I must say that the amount of progress I'm seeing in areas like those compared to just one version ago is really incredible. And if these are the kind of improvements we can expect going forward, 2024 is going to be a wild year for full self-driving. Coming up here is one more example of its creeping behavior at this uncontrolled intersection with no signs or anything. You can see it just goes right to the point where traffic is approaching, slows down, and then proceeds once it can actually see. And we have a right turn coming up, and based on our previous experiences, you'd think it'd be going for it right now. There's a huge gap and it can easily fit in there, but it does not. I think it probably learned its lesson from the last time it tried to do that. I'm just kidding. That's not a real thing. But that is one of the side effects of having it completely AI-based, is that you never really know what it's going to do in any situation. It really makes things pretty interesting. There is a cyclist to our right and an oncoming car approaching, and it decides to shoot the gap, even running over the center line a little bit, which was extremely human-like and probably how everybody would have treated that situation. That is an area where older versions struggled quite a bit. Now, we've seen quite a few pretty human-like moves out of the beta so far, but this next one definitely tops it. It's probably one of the most human things I've ever seen it do. We have a right turn to make at this stoplight ahead, and traffic in front of us begins slowing down, and they actually come to a full stop here, and a car approaches from the right-hand side out of that parking lot. Instead of pulling up behind the car in front of us, which would have blocked this guy into the parking lot, it takes the polite approach and lets this guy go. He even waves thanks before he goes. This was an absolutely incredible move. I remember not that long ago, full self-driving wouldn't even drive over these green markings on the road because it was scared of them. Look how far we have come. And when I posted that clip on X, there were a few people that said the car should have just taken the right-of-way, which would have mean blocking him in there. And usually I am on team just take your right-of-way and don't be polite, but in that scenario, I don't think the car did anything wrong at all, and I think that was the correct move. Now, our navigation point is right up here off to the left at about 100 feet, and it does seem like it just wants to come to a stop in the middle of the road here instead of trying to pull over. Again, not really sure when it decides to pull over versus when it just stops in the middle of the street, but interestingly, after it sees this car approach, it decides to start moving again. That is something I've noticed with version 12 in general, is that if there's another car in the scene, it seems to make it kind of behave differently. Like when we were at that construction zone and a car pulled up behind it, it made it move, and that is something that's pretty consistent. Version 12 seems to have a little bit of a sense of urgency, I guess you could call it, when there's other traffic around. It does end up just coming to a complete stop here, and unfortunately, it's brought itself down a dead-end road. So after choosing a new navigation route, you can see it has to do a U-turn in this little court at the end of the road here. Now, version 12 can actually do U-turns, but it cannot back up. So let's see if it's able to complete the U-turn in this small space. Starting out strong, swinging the wheel to the right, but doesn't quite turn hard enough to the left in order to complete the maneuver, and ends up just stopping here. which does cause our second non-critical disengagement of the drive because it needed a little bit of human help, at least until it has the ability to reverse on its own. And I did only back up a little tiny bit here to see if it could make this harsh turn by itself, and after re-engaging, it actually does completely turn the steering wheel to almost the fully locked position to complete this turn. There's also a Model 3 backing out of their driveway here, and just like my initial review of version 12, I just really love how much room it gives people who are backing up and doing maneuvers like this. Makes them feel very comfortable instead of getting right up on them like version 11 used to. Something else I should mention that's been a pretty significant upgrade compared to the first version of version 12 that I tried is that, if you remember, I complained about the automatic speed control setting because it would kind of go fast and then slow down and speed up again and wouldn't be able to maintain a consistent speed. And I'm happy to report that for the most part, this version pretty much completely fixes it. For the most part, it's able to stay very, very smooth. We have a right turn to make at the light ahead, and again, there's plenty of room to go right by the SUV on the right-hand side, but it does not go for it. I think it's still a little bit scared because of what happened previously. But then it does the most human thing I think I've ever seen it do, where the light turns green and the person in front of us does not immediately go. They're kind of asleep at the wheel, and autopilot starts creeping towards them like, hey buddy, are you gonna go or what? Absolutely unbelievable, undeniable human behavior there. That is definitely not something that can be manually programmed into the car in any meaningful way. I can understand the argument for people who don't like that kind of behavior, but I really don't mind showing attention to other drivers. He may have saw us creeping up behind him before he saw the green light. I have it navigating straight through the construction zone that tripped it up before, but interestingly, instead of trying to go around it, this time it makes a right turn instead. Now, most of the time this would have been a good thing because it can reroute a different way, but it actually just turned into a dead end. You can see on the navigation now it says it wants to make a U-turn, which there is no possible way it's going to do in this little section right here, which does cause our third non-critical disengagement of the drive because this needs a little bit of a human touch, at least until it has the capability of backing up by itself. I think things are going to get super wild once full self-driving has the capability of reversing all on its own. I'm secretly hoping that that comes in the same update as the Actually Smart summon. After re-engaging here, we still have the same navigation route, which means we're making an immediate right here into the construction zone. But unfortunately, this time it does not reroute on its own, and it seems like it wants to head straight into this area, causing our second critical disengagement of the drive. So looks like for now at least version 12 is still lacking the data or training it needs to know what to do in a road closure situation, which I'm a bit thankful for because that means this channel is still useful. Coming up here, there's a car who's pulling out off the side of the road towards the stop sign super slowly. Not sure what they're doing, and they actually move back over to the right-hand side of the road, and you can see we pass them with confidence. Now, although situations like that look pretty mundane, these are the types of situations that normal self-driving cars have a lot of trouble with because it takes real intelligence to know that you should pass in that situation, because in any coded sense, that was a slow-moving car that moved slowly towards the stop sign and then stopped at it. So we really shouldn't pass, but, you know, of course we really should have. One of the benefits of being trained on human data. You can see a no right turn on red sign here, and for the first time ever, it really does seem like full self-driving is reading the sign. Maybe reading is the wrong word, but it understands. No creeping whatsoever and just waits for the light to turn green. This is the only no right on red light that I've been to so far, so I can't say for sure that everywhere is completely fixed, but it used to have problems at lights like those that didn't have a dedicated red arrow to tell you that it wasn't okay to make a right, and that is progress. Something interesting happens up here where the navigation route says that we're going to turn right in a few hundred feet up here, but instead the car ends up just pulling over instead. And at first this kind of confused me. I was like, why the heck is it pulling off to the side of the road here when it's not done navigating? But then I actually looked at the navigation route that I had chosen, and it pulled over at the pin, as you can see here. So where it's pulled over right where the pin was dropped and completely ignored the actual navigation instructions. That's actually really interesting behavior if you think about it, because that means there's at least a little bit of a disconnect between the navigation system and full self-driving. It really did just pull over at the pin and ignored the navigation route. Some strategically placed trash cans up here, giving the beta a little bit more of a challenge, but handles it absolutely beautifully with zero hesitation. If you look further down the road here, you can actually see there's a dog crossing the street, and interestingly, it's visualized on the autopilot display as a little blob crossing the street, and it also starts offsetting for it a little bit and moving to the left to give him more room. I know it's pretty hard to see, but if you go back, I think it's actually pretty incredible how early it started rendering that dog on the display. It saw it from a ways out. Another unprotected turn here where it has to creep quite a bit out in order to have good visibility of incoming traffic from the left. And this is an area where the last version of version 12 was very aggressive, but again, this one does a much nicer job and creeps way slower until it can actually see. Coming up here, the car does something really incredible. As we approach this next red light, you might be able to see a mother walking her children across the street to the left. And instead of proceeding all the way to the stop line, full self-driving actually stops a little bit early to give them extra room. This is just such nice driving. Unfortunately, the human to the right doesn't do this. And watch the mother look at this car like, hey man, are you gonna stop or what? And then after they're completely out of our path, it goes ahead and moves towards the stop line. Absolutely incredible. I've seen some people wonder how full self-driving is ever going to be safer than a human if it's only trained on human data. And it's simple. It's just going to be very good driving human data and not data from that guy on our right. As we approach this next unprotected left turn, for some reason the car felt extremely hesitant to proceed, and I was like, why the heck is it so hesitant here? And then I saw the pedestrian walking through the crosswalk. Now you can go back and watch that, but this pedestrian seemed to appear out of absolutely nowhere. Now you can call me a bad driver all you want, but the car definitely handled that particular situation better than I would have. My focus was on traffic ahead. I definitely would have saw him, but I would have made a much more awkward situation for that pedestrian. Another borderline too human of a move up here, where this light turns yellow and its first reaction is to brake, then decides nah, and just guns it through the intersection, actually accelerating through the yellow light here. Very, very human-like thing to do, and it's really interesting watching the car think through situations that need to be made very quickly. The car in front of us is making a left-hand turn, but there's traffic stopped in front of him, and at first I was like, wow, he really obeys the lane lines that are painted on the ground, but that's actually not what was happening, and he's actually turning left into the driveway short of that. So there are a couple of impatient humans that pass from behind, but as soon as it's clear, we go ahead and pass as well. So far, even though we've had a couple of critical disengagements due to that construction zone, my God, does this version feel very, very good and ready for wide release. I'm really expecting it to be pushed out wider any day now. Slowing this down because it's the only roundabout that we went through. It's a very boring roundabout and it handles it no problem at all, but it is the only roundabout of this drive, so I had to slow it down. And evil me navigated into that same construction zone as before, except from a different area this time. This time the road is completely blocked off though, with a gentleman standing there telling us to stop, and the car stops very early here and doesn't proceed forward. And I think it's fair to call this one another non-critical disengagement, since it stopped completely by itself and didn't seem like it was trying to proceed at all. Doing a quick 3-point turn here and navigating to our last destination of the day, which is more in the downtown area of San Jose. The road ahead is a little bit confusing. You can see we have a right turn to make in a few hundred feet, but the road doesn't look like it goes that way. It sweeps off to the left, and then after we make the left, the road markings all just kind of disappear. And even though I think this is a pretty confusing place to drive, my goodness, how smooth the steering wheel stays through the entire thing. I would love somebody to take version 11 through here and just record it so we can have a comparison. We have another unprotected left turn up here across a few lanes of traffic, and you can see after coming to a complete stop, it again slowly creeps forward right to the point where it can see incoming traffic, waits for a good moment to go, and just goes. Couldn't have done it better myself. All the unprotected turns I've had, so far at least, have been considerably better even compared to just one version ago. I think we're going to have to see Chuck's unprotected left turn, which is super intense, in order to get a real idea of how good this thing is. But for me, so far, so good. It has nailed absolutely every single one of them and seems to stop at a really good spot in order to get good visibility of incoming traffic from both sides. We have a left turn coming up here. It's a little bit past the truck, and interestingly, it seems like it kind of knows this and gets prepared to pass, but it didn't end up needing to as he made the turn. Now, unfortunately, there is a sign in the middle of the road that's saying that the road is closed except for local traffic. I know this got me in trouble in the comments last time, but since our navigation pin was right at the end of this street, right off to the right, I just let it happen again. Technically, we're local traffic, right? But unfortunately for full self-driving, the destination right off to the right up here is beyond another road closure, and the street ahead of us is really closed. Not just for local traffic only, this is a truly closed road. You can see there is a gap off to the left, so the cones don't completely block the road here, and I was hoping that it would just stop, but unfortunately it did try to pass off to the left, which did cause our third and final critical disengagement. And because we've been driving for over an hour and a half now, and all my camera batteries were dying at once, this is where I decided to call it. In summary, there's a lot of things to be really excited about with version 12.3. One of my biggest complaints about it not being able to maintain speed has been improved in a big way, and it finally feels like the car can carry a more consistent speed, and it isn't slowing down unnecessarily nearly as much as it used to, and it finally feels usable and comfortable on wide open roads with no lead car in front. The behavior for unprotected turns seems to be improved in a big way as well, with the car creeping in a much more natural way and only proceeding when it has good visibility of incoming traffic on both sides. And for better or worse, it's more human than ever, doing things I'd never thought I'd see the full self-driving beta do. I'm sure opinions on this will be split on if this is a good or a bad thing, but I think you already know my opinion. I think if you're sharing the roads with humans, the best thing to do is be human-like and predictable. And last but not least, all of these improvements happened on a single dot update from version 12.2 to version 12.3. If this rate of improvement continues, I think I'm going to have to think of some new ideas for a YouTube channel. And on to the negatives. There's no way around it. We had 3 what I would consider critical disengagements where the car would have gotten itself into some trouble if I hadn't have intervened. The good news here is that they were all for the exact same thing, which is not knowing what to do for a road closure, which seems like a fixable problem. We also had 4 non-critical disengagements where the car needed a bit of help. On the first one, the safety systems were actually what disengaged full self-driving and made me take over immediately, but honestly, I think it probably would have handled the maneuver fine, even if it was a smaller gap than most drivers would go for. The other 3 non-critical disengagements are pretty easily solved once the car has the ability to back up, which I believe we're going to be seeing very soon. If not on full self-driving, at least summon, and I bet it won't be long after that where the car will do it all on its own. Thank you so much for watching. Truly do appreciate you. Until next time, everybody. Bye.